Hi, and welcome to the new Fantasy5 Podcast. With the season over, everyone dying for some football, and the Nations League not really cutting it, let's jump into a little podcast with our co-host Daniel. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to be here with you, not to meet you. And let's talk all things fantasy and football. Our first topic of discussion is going to be our Premier League team of the season. And as you may see by Daniel, he's already a little bit nervous. He was supposed to be doing this intro, but looking at his team, I can see why he's a little fearful.
I've got lots of stats. I'm going to back myself up. Let's put it that way.
Look forward to it. We're all going to be going for a 4-3-3 formation, and these are our picks. All right, Daniel, let's hear it. Who you got starting in goal?
So I've got Aaron Ramsdale.
Interesting.
Personally, I think he's bounced back from 2 relegations. He was at Bournemouth, he was at Sheffield United, obviously had a terrible time there. I think as a goalkeeper, you probably put yourself to blame for that because you're conceding the goals. He's conceded many goals at those clubs. Now he's been put into an Arsenal side, which has obviously not the strongest defence, which actually contradicts me for my next pick of my centre-back because I put Gabriel as my centre-back. But Ramsdale, he's been put into a side which isn't that strong. Arsenal have got not the best team this season, but then he's finished 5th with that team. He's got plenty of clean sheets. And I think to bounce back and have his first sort of breakthrough season for a big Premier League club, to be put under that pressure at his age, to do that well, some of the saves he's been putting out as well.
I would say that he's made a few great saves this season, but he's not in my team of the season.
I think he's up there with some of the best goalkeepers in the Premier League, and I personally think he should be competing Pickford for the England spot. And to be saying that one season after he's been at Arsenal shows how much of a good season he's had. Name one English goalkeeper who's had their first season at a big Premier League club and then gone on to be number 1 for England and competed with Pickford.
It's a hard one to answer that, as there's rarely any good English goalkeepers, and there haven't been for many a year. And
he had Joe Hart.
Yeah, but Joe Hart, he won the league. He done quite well. He also had he had a breakthrough season of his own at City when he was very young. So I think it's hard to compare. But it's interesting that you brought up Pickford. I think Ramsdale and Pickford are both absolute hotheads who they get too excited, they go too crazy, they get too angry, that it puts off your centre-backs, it puts off the rest of the team. Pickford, I know you haven't mentioned it, but Pickford, half the time his defenders are just telling him to calm down. And I can very much see Ramsdale becoming that keeper, which I think is an issue.
But do you need that? I mean, as a keeper, Joe Hart, for example, he's very heated. I mean, you've seen him screaming at the fans, give the ball back.
And he's not a good keeper.
Passionate.
He's not.
He was in his prime. I think he was. Do you not think he was a good keeper when he was at City?
He was in his prime, and then as soon as he got hot-headed, he started, thinking, in the tunnel before games, going mental, psyching himself up. You don't need that from the keeper. You need to have all the trust in the world in your keeper. Your defenders need to know that they can push forward, that your keeper's going to be there, the last line of defence. And I feel like with Hart, you didn't get that. You don't get that with Pickford, and I think Ramsdale is an unbelievable shot stopper, and we've seen that plenty this season, but I'm not sure that he gives that conviction that the defenders and the rest of the team need. Whereas Sarr for Wolves, he's been unbelievable this season. He's made, I think, over 120 saves. He's had the most key saves from any other keeper in the league. So you've got Alisson, Edison, who only saved, I think, 60. Edison only had 60 shots against him this season. I think Sarr would be my pick. Also, Wolves, I think it was Brighton and Crystal Palace all conceded less goals besides Liverpool and City than Arsenal. So, they're all lower league teams. I think Crystal Palace, they switch between Gator and Butland quite a bit. So it's hard to pick one of them. But for me, Sarr would be my pick. Agree to disagree on the first one?
Agree to disagree on that one. That's fine. Okay. So obviously, as we're going along with this, do put your comments down below, like who's your goalkeeper, who's your left back, who's your centre back. We'd love to see what your team of seasons are. I reckon they'll all be very different because it's been a very interesting season. There's been lots of standout players. So as we're going along, do think about, do play along, put your comments down below as well.
So, left back, who are you starting? Should we start with right back because it's probably easier? Right back. Who's your right back?
So mine's Trent.
Shocking.
Really?
No, I've got Trent also. So
Yeah, okay.
I think it'd be shocking if there's anyone else besides Trent being chosen here.
So I'll say this, and you disagree with me because we spoke about this before the podcast. Trent, I think for me, is the best passer in the Premier League right now.
Yeah.
I think no one compares. There's no one out there. I mean, you've got De Bruyne, who is a good passer, but I think in terms of getting the ball, picking out a pass, every time Trent gets the ball, you trust him to make that amazing through ball, amazing pass. I don't think anyone compares to Trent in the Premier League, and he's only, 22? Trent, 23?
I think when you start comparing him to the best passer in the league, I think you've got to take a few things into consideration. And one of them being he plays as either right wing back or right full back, and he rarely has players coming from behind. So he has always that time to set himself and play the ball. Whereas you have Kevin De Bruyne or even Harry Kane, who when they're on the ball, they're moving and they're playing those passes. Dead ball situation, yeah, you want Trent behind it. Corners, free kicks, on the wing, the ball's not moving, you want Trent behind it.
But do you not think as a fullback, when he gets the ball, he is then the last man on the ball, so he has got that pressure of if he loses it, he'll have strikers chasing him down, he'll have midfielders pressing him. He has to pick out the perfect pass. If he messes up there, he is the last man and there's no one behind him. Whereas De Bruyne loses the ball, it's fine because they've got the defence covering him.
I think it's very rare that Trent has to have those issues. You normally, when you're playing against Liverpool, teams sit deep. They've already got enough to deal with Salah, Mane, whether it's Jota, Diaz, as well as the centre midfielders who are all great passers of the ball. So you normally see Trent in those pockets of spaces on the wing where, yeah, unless he has a really crap pass, they're going to come under pressure, but that's the same as in most positions. So I think Trent's definitely the right back of the season, but I wouldn't put him as the best passer.
So you say De Bruyne's the best passer in the Premier League right now?
I would say De Bruyne, but I would have Harry Kane as a very close second.
Oh no, I can't. I don't think so. I don't think Harry Kane. I think he's got a very good pass in him. I don't think you can compare his passing. We're going to go into this a lot because I'm not a big Harry Kane fan, whereas Jacob is a Spurs fan, so he probably supports Harry Kane. For that reason,
I don't know. You could take away. I am a Spurs fan, so
would you say that your bias comes into that, or would you say?
Yeah, maybe there's a potential bias, but if you look at stats, if you look at key passes, if you look at his assists over the last 2 seasons, when he's really had a focus more on playing the ball rather than being the only goal scorer in the team, I think there's not many people, if any, who have outperformed him. He's also played the full 2 seasons. Kevin De Bruyne has been, normally it's Kane who's in and out of injury. Kevin De Bruyne has been a little bit more in and out of injury these last 2 years. I would still have Kevin De Bruyne as number 1 because when the time really counts and when they really need it, he always pulls through. But I would have probably Kane second, Trent third. So let's hear your centre-backs.
So I've got Rudiger as one of my centre-backs. I think he's just been world-class at Chelsea. Chelsea being solid. I think at the start of their season, they were barely conceding any goals. And he was one of the main reasons for that. I don't know who you've put for your first centre-back, if you've got Rudiger. Yeah,
it's going to be a major miss for Chelsea next season. I think they're going to have to, I think with Christensen is also potentially leaving, I think they're going to have to fill that void. Rudiger's not only a quality defender, but he's aggressive. He's not someone you want to play against. Any argument that happens on the pitch, he's the first one in there, with his stance, making sure people know that he's there, really.
And have you seen his defending style as well? How he comes up very close to players and sort of almost hugs them from behind when there's a throwing or there's a free kick. Like he uses his size and his presence to really
only him
overwhelm
and
the players.
Him and Van Dijk both do that.
Yeah, him and Van Dijk, I think, are both up there with the best defenders in the league. So we're going to miss, I think, probably one of the best defenders in the Premier League next season.
I agree. He's in my team as well. I think he's been superb this year. And as I said, I think it'll be a massive miss for Chelsea. And my second defender, I was going to go with Van Dijk, but actually I think he's not had as good of a season as he could have. So he might still be the best defender, but I think he's not had as good of a season.
So on that quickly, do you think, because obviously there's a big argument going around at the moment that he's the best defender of all time, do you think he's the best defender in the Premier League right now? Let alone...
Yeah, I think he is the best defender in the Premier League. I wouldn't have him in my team of the season, though. I would have gone for Diaz. But I do think that he is the best in the Premier League. He's definitely not the best defender of all time. If you've seen defenders lead their country and lead their teams to silverware and to World Cups and to major tournaments, and I think that Van Dijk this year was unable to, and he did. I think it was 2 seasons ago when they won the league, and he was a very dominant force. But I don't know if he's had that same. He hasn't emitted that same emotion to his team this year. Naturally. If Van Dijk continues doing what he's doing for the next 5 years, and Liverpool are forced to reckon with for those 5 years, then yes, he'll be up there with the best defenders of all time. He's not been doing it consistently enough. He definitely wasn't the best defender when he was at Southampton. When he's come to Liverpool, he's been a different beast. Don't take anything away from that. But I don't think that he can be, even someone like John Terry, who did it for a continuous long period. Like, I hate him as a person. Don't really rate him as a fan.
I think John Terry and Rio Ferdinand are both overrated because they're English as well. That's a massive opinion, I know, but I think because they're English, they get all this recognition.
Rio Ferdinand was the first player to really bring the ball out and play a ball-playing centre-back. So he was the beginning of a new breed, and it's hard to tell, when that happens, because he's setting the benchmarks. John Terry would put his life and for his team. Like, I remember one time, I think it was they're playing Barcelona, and all you see on the camera is, I think, Iniesta shoots, and you see Terry's head just coming across.
I remember that.
Stop the ball like this, and you'll never see that from a player now. And that fight, determination, grit in the changing rooms, it means a lot to a club. And similar to Van Dijk, like, you didn't want to fuck up for Liverpool back then, because you didn't want to mess up for Liverpool back then, because Van Dijk would be on you. And it's a presence, and you're like, oh my, I can't, I have to be 100% concentration all the time. I think John Terry did that as well for his club.
Obviously we'll leave this here after this. Yeah. I'm going to say Van Dijk, I'd take him over John Terry. I'd take him over Rio Ferdinand. Probably even take him over Vidic. I don't know about Maldini or anything like that, because I didn't see him enough of them play, because I didn't watch much of the Serie A back then, so I can't comment on that. But if you put Van Dijk back into that John Terry, Rio Ferdinand era, and you put them back in the same, like, 2 different teams, I reckon Van Dijk would have outperformed John Terry and Rio Ferdinand
over the last 2 years.
Yeah.
The Van Dijk of the last 2
current
years.
Van Dijk. Current Van Dijk outplays John Terry and Rio Ferdinand. I understand Terry is like a good leader. He's a captain, leader, legend. That's what they call him, and he's English. But I think in terms of ability, Van Dijk it beats them every time.
Okay, so I've chosen Rudiger and Diaz, because I think Diaz has had the better season than Van Dijk this year. And you've gone with Van Dijk and Rudiger?
I've gone for Gabriel and Rudiger.
As some would say, unbelievable, Jeff.
I'm gonna get slated for this, but I think in the struggling Arsenal team, they've struggled this season. There's no doubt about it. They bottled 4th place. I think if you put him into a Chelsea team, you put him into a City team like Diaz, I think he's no different ability-wise. This season, he hasn't shown a different ability to Diaz, to like any of the top defenders in the Premier League. I think he's just being put into a rubbish Arsenal team, and he's looked down upon because he plays for Arsenal.
I don't think he's looked down upon, but can be reckless at times, more so than Diaz and Van Dijk. He gives away a lot of fouls in dangerous positions as well, which it is his first season. So is it his first season?
I think it's his first season, but what I would say is that, say you took Gabriel out of the Arsenal team, they didn't have him all season, I think they would have finished a lot lower than if they. So if you took him out of that team, they struggle a lot more. I think he makes a big difference to the Arsenal defence. I think he holds it together as much as he can. So that's why I say if you put him into a City team, he'd fit in perfectly, and he'd play just as well as Diaz, because he's got that support around him. Like Diaz has obviously Cancelo, he has Edison behind him, he's got De Bruyne in midfield. Like, he's got so many options around him that actually it makes him look a lot better, a lot more secure as a defender. Gabriel is almost like a big fish in a small pond, and he's shown that this season. And he didn't need to show, like Ramsdale, no one expected him to show how good he was in the team that he's got around him. He's had a big challenge, and that's why I think he's played better than Van Dijk, because Van Dijk has got that support around him. He hasn't really impressed as much as he can. I think Gabriel's reached his full potential in a team who hasn't reached their full potential.
I think I let the audience. You tell us your thoughts on that Gabriel pick. We'll leave it there. So moving on to your left back, who you thinking? Who you picking?
So I've got Andrew Robertson. Don't know why I said his full name like that, but I've got Robertson. I personally just can't name another left back who competes with him. No one who's when I was thinking of my team, I thought first who comes to my mind first, and it's Robertson. I think he's just played exceptionally. He's got 3 goals, 11 assists. 11 assists from left back is incredible. I just can't name anyone who outshines Robertson.
Okay, interesting. Well, I'll tell you some facts here. So Cucurella, who's the Brighton left back, I hope I pronounced his name correctly. He created more chances from open play than both Robertson and Cancelo this year, with 40. And playing for a team like Brighton, that's quite not bad at all. Brighton also conceded, I think, the 5th least goals out of any team in the Premier League this season. So again, that's showing his quality. I think he was also voted their player of the season, the fans' player of the season. So again, another ticked box. I think if I had to be forced into a position, I would pick still Cancelo because he's been excellent. But I'm going to sneakily put him in my midfield, I think. So I would have Cucurella as my left back. So moving on to your 3 in midfield, who would be your holding midfielder?
I don't know. I haven't really thought about attacking and defending. I've just put 3 players who are good centre midfielders. So I've got Gallagher as my first centre mid. I think he's just stood out massively this season for his age. Some of the goals he's scored, he's carried Palace massively this season. Like, he's one of their star players, and Palace have had a very good season as well.
He is very exciting, and he's always open in the box. I feel like if he had better wide men, I know Zaha's excellent, but Zaha's a little bit selfish. I think Gallagher is always drifting in, and he's a bit like Dele Alli at the beginning of his career. If you ever look when they're in the final third, most likely Gallagher's open, and it's just about finding him more.
He creates space, he runs into good positions, he looks exciting on the ball, he can shoot from outside the box, he can score exciting goals. Incredible player, and for his age and the fact he's come on loan from Chelsea, he's proven himself. He's proven to everyone that he's a class player, and I think it'd be rude not to put him into the team this season. I think he deserves it massively. You can tell he's hardworking. I think we both agree on that. So that's one thing we've agreed on.
Well,
shock.
I've gone more with the positioning. So I've got Rodri as that holding midfielder. I think he's criminally underrated. I think, he's always an outlet. He's amazing at switching the ball, which City's all about. He plays the ball quickly, again, what City need in order to move up the pitch. And I think because he's not fast and have too many crunching tackles, he's not really not considered like Kante or considered like other central defensive midfielders. But I do think he's had an excellent season. So I've got Rodri, and then I'm playing. It was close. Listen, I think Declan Rice needs to get a mention here. I think he's had a good season. I think he's also maybe a bit overrated because he's English. He can definitely move the ball forward, which some of our other England players can't do. So I think him being a CDM is actually not necessarily his best position. And when we play him and Calvin Phillips holding together, it kills me for England. But I'm actually going to go with Cancelo. So Cancelo made the most tackles in the opposition half this year. His assists, his goals, his creativity is unquestionable. And I would play him holding with Rodri.
I don't know how you're putting Cancelo in midfield personally.
Well, how City play, like Cancelo does go wide, but also he comes in. If the ball's on the other side, he's always coming into that central midfielder role. So, as in, like, naturally, I think he'll be able to play that. Guardiola's, with his tactical genius.
So, can you see him moving into a centre midfield role, like in the future, or is that just
more so than Trent? More so than people thinking that Trent can play in the centre.
I think Trent would smash Cancelo any day in midfield, in centre midfield. I think Trent's he's just the passing ability. He's switched on. He's quick. He's sharp. I think Cancelo's good down the wing. He can run. He can obviously defend really well. But I can't imagine him playing centre midfield under pressure. Personally, I think Trent is. I rate Trent a lot more. I think he's so underrated. I think Trent's so underrated.
Who underrates him?
everyone. People say he shouldn't be starting for England. He's
I think only Gareth Southgate has said that ever, and that was what when Gareth Southgate was questioning, and we all thought he was questioning, but actually he wasn't. Like, he was the starting right back. I think everyone came out being like, "What are you talking about? He has to start." I think Trent's definitely got people definitely rate him and know his class. I think maybe in terms of him being world class, then there's definitely.
No, I think he's world class. I think he's the best right back in the world right now.
But not defensively.
Yeah, defensively. Have you not seen? Did you see him play against? He played against Chelsea. He made some of the best tackles I've seen a defender make against Chelsea, against elite players.
But who? Who are the elite players at Chelsea who are on the left wing? There's not.
They've got their third in the Premier League. They're elite team. They've got. It doesn't matter who they've got. They're an elite side. The way they attack, the way. If
you had Mbappe playing against you, would you rather have Kyle Walker or Trent as your defender?
Trent, any day.
Interesting.
I think. There's a reason why Liverpool were second in the league, and if he was terrible defensively, he'd cause more errors. I think Reece James has more errors than Alexander-Arnold. I think Cancelo has more errors than Alexander-Arnold. I think
But we're not talking about those players. If you put him up against Kyle Walker, I think he's not been beaten this season. Who defensively you can't compare the two.
But
Trent loses his concentration. Trent gets caught out of position. If teams that beat Liverpool, it's normally because, like Spurs, like other teams who are getting points against Liverpool. Liverpool didn't win against a top 4 club this season, and I think that's largely behind one. Klopp's tactics being, the other managers understanding that, but also because of Trent. Because Trent pushes too high, he gets beaten from behind so many times, and then he does well sometimes to track back, or his other defenders cover for him, but he's exposed.
I think Trent's so well-rounded. I think Reece James is getting there. I think he will become as good as Trent, but I think right now Trent leads that he is the best fullback in the world. I can't see another person who I'd rather play at right back than Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Yeah. I don't think Reece James will ever get as good as Trent in terms of distribution, but he's a very good fullback for sure.
A lot of Chelsea fans will disagree with you there.
We'll see.
We'll move on.
Yeah. So moving on. So you've got in your mid. Who's in your centre? Who's teaming up with Gallagher for you?
So I have I have a weird midfield. I haven't thought about this formation wise, but I've got Mount as my next centre midfielder.
And the third one?
My third one's Kevin De Bruyne. So I probably have him just as a free in midfield. But yeah, Mason Mount for me, so underrated again. Underrated. I don't know why people are saying he's rubbish on Twitter. Like, I've seen so many comments saying he's terrible. He's got 11 goals, 11 assists. Bear in mind he's still very young as well. He's in a Chelsea team who have been average this season. I know they finished third, but they've been average, let's be honest. There's been no standout performances. They had one massive game where they won 7-0 or something, but they haven't competed with Liverpool and City. He's 11 goals, 11 assists. He's exciting on the ball. He gets himself into good positions to score. I think he's up there. I can't see why people would say he's rubbish.
I think those comments only are based maybe for his performances for England, where he went missing a little bit at times. Now Gareth Southgate has full faith in him, and I understand why. And he is an excellent player, and his ability is second to none. But I think on that, does he ever, grab the whatever it is by the neck, grab the game by the scruff of the neck? Like, does he take control of a game of football where in a world international stage, England as a team needs that? We don't have that in our midfield, and he's supposed to be that outlet. And I think if he can replicate his form this season for Chelsea, for England, then I think he'll get the respect he deserves. I agree with you that he's a quality player.
I just think in terms of Premier League, I think he's underrated. People say he's terrible. They shouldn't play him. He's a terrible player.
Who are these people that you're
on Twitter? And people will know what I'm talking about. If you go on Twitter, you search Mount. People say Mount's a fraud. Mount's overrated. Mount shouldn't. He's only 22, 23. I'm pretty sure. He's still so young, and he's so fresh to the game. He's come through the academy, and he's got 11 goals and 11 assists from midfield from where he's played on the wing. But he can play anywhere. He's scored 11 goals. He's got 11 assists.
We've heard that. 11 goals, 11 assists.
But
it's excellent. It's excellent returns, and I don't disagree. I think
you can't disagree with stats. You can't disagree with it, and I don't get why he is so overrated and
overrated or underrated.
Underrated, sorry. and that's for that reason I put in my team this season, just because I think he deserves to be there. I think he deserves to be there. I think he's played for a very good Chelsea side, and he's almost solidified his position in that Chelsea side at his age, similar to how Gallagher did for Palace.
Interesting. Okay.
Who have you gone with your two?
Well, I've got Cancelo and Rodri, and then I've got De Bruyne, like you, who I don't think needs much talking about. He's the engine within the City squad, and when he's fit and playing, then he's unstoppable. Well, moving on to what might be more controversial. Who are you choosing for your front three?
So let's start with right wing. So I've gone for Bowen, Jarrod Bowen.
That's over Mo Salah, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how you haven't put Bowen in your team. I mean, Salah's been poor recently. He's been terrible. He's ghosted in we said this, like 11 finals, but even in the last 4 months he lost Africa Cup of Nations, he lost the Premier League title, he lost the Champions League. I know it's just Premier League team this season, but that sort of just shows he is a bit of a ghost in those big games. He started the season very well, admittedly, but since he's been
in that time period, say the last 12 games in which I think he only started 9 of them, he scored 4 goals and 3 assists. So Bowen's goals per game is at 0.33, which if I work out quickly, Salah's at in the worst part of his season is having the same amount of goals per game.
Salah plays for Liverpool. Bowen plays for West Ham. Yeah, Bowen's got 12 goals, got 12 assists from a right wing position for West Ham. Salah plays for Liverpool. Salah's got that support around him. He's got Trent behind him. He's one of the best passers in the world. We've discussed that. He's incredible. He's got Jota, he's got Mane, he's got players midfield, Thiago midfield. Bowen's part of a West Ham team who don't really have any standout players other than Declan Rice. And he's gone on to score 12 goals, 12 assists, 24. He's been involved in 24 goals this season, and he's now got an England call up because of it. And
there's no doubt he's had a very good season, and he's overperformed. And it's great to see someone who didn't come from an academy, went straight into the conference, I think it was, and worked his way up. Like, it's an unbelievable story.
I think you just need to watch his last England performance to see how good he really is and how sort of underrated he is. Because he plays for West Ham, I think he is looked down upon almost a little bit. I think if he played for a team like Liverpool and he performed how he did, I think everyone would be like, wow, Bowen's like incredible. He's probably one of England's best players. He played for England. That last game he played for, he was just, every time he got the ball, he looked exciting. He was creating things for a really dull England side. And he was standing out compared to everyone. I think he's incredible. Yeah,
listen, I think there's technically a lot of skill there. I think you've got other players, if you go back to what you said, you've got other players in the Liverpool team who have the same amount of returns as he does. So, they're not hitting Salah's returns. Jota, Mane, they're not getting anywhere near Salah's returns. They're also in the same team. So, Diaz. So, I would still, I think you can't ignore Salah. I don't like him as a player. Don't particularly like him as a person. But if we're looking at outright ability in the team of the season, you've got to pick him. So I've got him in my right wing. You've got Bowen. Let's leave it.
That's all right. Salah or Bowen for your team of the season. Comment below.
Yeah.
Who have you chosen?
Let us know. Who would you choose? As your left winger, who you got?
So I've got Jota.
Jota or Jota? How do we say it?
I don't know. Yeah, Perez Jota. I'm terrible at pronouncing names. We're going to learn this. I want to get so many comments saying you pronounce this name wrong because, sorry, I can't.
We've got Conte and Jota so far.
Okay, what's his name?
Jota.
Jota. Okay.
I think so.
Okay, but yeah. Again, sort of just burst onto the scene for Liverpool. Started scoring plenty of goals. I think it's been a key part of Liverpool's success this season to get them to second. A big part of them in the FA Cup. Big part of them get to the Champions League final. Just think I can't name anyone who compares. I wouldn't even put Mane up against him in the left wing position. I'd put Jota over him in terms of how well he's outperformed everyone else.
It's hard to say that though. As in, maybe for Liverpool, he's outperformed some players. Like you've got Son for Spurs, who's top goal scorer, Premier League top goal scorer, multiple assists, big chances created. I think the most big chances created for Tottenham at least. He's criminally underrated. The
difference between Son and Jota is that Spurs finished 4th, Liverpool finished 2nd, and Son wasn't able to score those important goals, be part of those important moments to take Spurs further. I guess you can't blame that all on Son. I get that, but I think
Jota and Son played the same amount of games this season. How many? Jota scored. I'm gonna have to look at my notes for this, but Jota scored 15 goals and 4 assists. Son had 23 goals and 7 assists. So he's beaten him, nearly doubled him in assists, and beaten him on both sections. Both 35 appearances. Son had 10 big chances created. Jota had 7 big chances created. I think it's uncomparable. And the fact that you've got Bowen in your team based on his performance for the club and then Jota in there, I think...
Well, there's different reasons. I think the fact he burst into the scene, I don't think Jota started playing well until a certain point in the season, and then he started scoring plenty of goals, and at one point he was scoring just a couple of goals per game. I think at one point he went on a run, and that was really important for Liverpool's run up to the final day of the season. So I think he's scored. He's not ghosted in times where Liverpool have needed him, whereas Son's been very inconsistent, I think, throughout the season. I think his goals tally up to a good amount, but I think there's been times in the season where he hasn't been great. Then he got on a good run of being good.
As a Spurs fan, I think Son had a hard start to the season. He wasn't as clinical as he's been in the past, and yet he still had these phenomenal numbers. So
is that because of Harry Kane? Is that because he depends a lot on Harry Kane to perform well? Because Harry Kane obviously had a slow start to the season. We'll go on to this.
I think the whole club had a slow start to the season. You know, we had Nuno as the manager. He was awful. Even in the first 3 games that we won, you could see that there was no identity within the team. The next 3 results were more clear when we lost 3 games in a row. So I think that had a big impact, an impact on all the players. I think Son was the only player who really managed to achieve something in that beginning half of the season and kept us sort of in it. So that definitely, I think, saved us, really. I'm going to have to disagree on this one. I think Son's been exceptional. I think Son is the most underrated player in the league. The fact that he wasn't voted for any of the Player of the Years this
I
season
agree with that. I agree
crazy.
that he deserved a nomination. I don't think he's the most underrated player in the league. I think there's plenty more underrated players in the league. I think even like Mount's one of them. I think Trent's another one. And I know you said you don't personally underrate them, but there are lots of fans on, obviously, Twitter's hard to go by because there's a whole wide range. But if you look at that, I don't think Son's underrated. I think he's massively rated. I think everyone knows how good he is. I think he's underrated by the league, not by the players not nominating him. But I think by fans, I don't think he's underrated.
It's interesting. I think Son was English. He'll be one of the best players. He'll be thought of as world class and one of the best players in the world.
But yeah, we'll leave that there. So
who's your centre forward?
So for me, I've gone for Ivan Toney. I don't know why you're laughing though. That's the thing, because who else would you compare? I know who you chose.
At some point in Daniel's life, I think maybe an ex-girlfriend or an ex-friend hurt him who was a Spurs fan, and now he's
12 goals, 5 assists. But if you look at the Premier League,
11 of them with his right foot and 5 of them penalties.
It doesn't matter how they scored their goals. They helped Brentford. He probably was the key to their survival. He probably was the key to their survival. I already knew because I'm a bit of a Brentford fan myself, so I've always followed them. So maybe I have a bit of bias because of that. So maybe that plays into it. But he was already class in the Championship. Came to the Premier League. No one really heard of. He's never played in the Premier League before. Put it that way.
So I come from a betting background, and the bookmakers, the pricing, the traders, they had a strong understanding of what he would achieve, and he underperformed this season. I think his line was 12.5, 13.
He's in the list he's in the top 10 list, I think, of the top scorers in the Premier League. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he's
of this season.
Of this season, I think he's in the top 10 or maybe top 20, top 15. But he's up there, and he's one of the highest scoring strikers in the Premier League.
And who's the highest?
I know who the highest is, but we'll go on to this.
Who's the highest?
So Jacob
who is the highest?
Harry Kane.
Okay, there we
Jacob has chosen Harry Kane.
And how bad was Harry Kane, as you mentioned in the beginning half of the season?
So he scored 2 goals in the first 15 games of the season, and that's why he doesn't deserve a spot on the team this season. I don't know how you've chosen him. The first 15
You've
games...
been consistent. You didn't pick Salah because you thought he dropped off, so that's fair. Kane had a poor start to the season, so I agree with that for sure.
Yeah, and 15 games is a lot of games, a lot of football. That's almost half the season that he's scored 2 goals in 15 games. I think just for that reason alone, you can't say he's been in the team this season because he hasn't been consistent throughout the whole season. Goals,
agreed that he was off. His XG, I think, this season is the first time ever that he scored below his XG, and I think that the beginning part of the season was a major part of that. But the transformation is so huge, and the numbers are so great. Like, he outscored Tony in the last 15 or 20 games of the season.
I just don't think you can judge him on half a season. I think if with the season started in January, he'd be in my team of season all over, because I agree he's had an amazing second half of the season. He's recovered himself, but it doesn't make up for the first 15 games of the season. You can't just ignore the fact that he goes to the first 15 games of the season and then still pick him for that.
But people look more at the first 15 games than the last 15 games. That's for sure. Like, you've chosen Conor Gallagher, who was much more influential at the beginning of the season than he was at the end of the season. And I agree he should be in there because overall he was still an excellent player. I think it's hard to really say that Kane is not. Listen, you think the first 15 games were the be
So
all
do you
end
think
all.
Harry Kane's been the best striker in the Premier League this season?
Yeah. As in, there's not many other strikers, but yeah, I do think he's better. I think he's better than Ronaldo this season, even though Ronaldo's had such an impact on United. But Ronaldo's goals, how many of them came against bottom 10 clubs? It's quite a significant amount.
He's the best striker in the Premier League. The Premier League's considered one of the best leagues in the world. Would you put him up there? Would you put him into your top 5 strikers right now in the world? Would you put Harry Kane in there?
Top 5, yeah.
Where would you put him in top 5?
I would put him just below Benzema.
So second.
Second.
Lewandowski, Haaland. Better than Haaland.
Yeah, better than Haaland was. How many games was Haaland injured this season? How many goals did Haaland score this season? What league? Let's see Haaland at City. All this talk about Werner, Havertz, Haaland. Let's see what he can do after coming.
Harry Kane's better than Haaland, better than Lewandowski this season.
Yeah,
that's fair enough. So,
but we'll leave it there. Thanks for joining us on our first pod. Please, message us, write in the comments underneath. Let us know your team of the season. Let us know if you're picking Kane or Ivan Toney, or you're picking. You
can't put it like that.
Or you're picking Bowen over Salah. Let us know, or you're picking Cancelo in your midfield as well. Let us know, and I hope you enjoyed the Fantasy 5 pod. And we'll see you next week.